August 29th, 2022. 17 years to the day. Margaret Chen stands at the edge of Lake Pontchartrain, watching the sunrise paint the water copper and gold. In her hands, a photograph, laminated, edges worn smooth from 2 decades of handling. Her daughter Emily, age 7, gap-toothed smile, holding a lunchbox shaped like a ladybug, the last photo taken before that Tuesday morning. Behind Margaret, 43 other families gather at the memorial. Some she recognizes, faces aged by grief into geography she knows better than her own reflection. Others are new, children of the disappeared, now adults themselves, carrying photos of siblings they barely remember. The stone monument lists 1,133 names, the official dead of Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, but there's another number that haunts this shoreline, a number that doesn't appear on any memorial, a number the city stopped discussing after the first 5 years. A number most people outside these families have forgotten entirely. 44, 37 children, 6 adults, 1 driver, St. Bernard Parish School District bus. 47. Last seen August 29, 2005, at 7:12 a.m., heading northwest towards safety as Hurricane Katrina approached. The bus never arrived at its destination. For 17 years, it existed only in missing person reports and the nightmares of parents who sent their children away that morning and never saw them again. Until yesterday afternoon, when a construction crew in the Bayou Sauvage Wildlife Refuge drove a piling into soft ground and hit something that shouldn't have been there. Something large, something metal, something buried under 17 years of sediment, vegetation and deliberate concealment. They found the bus, and what was inside proved that these children weren't victims of Hurricane Katrina at all. They were victims of something far darker, something human, something that used a natural disaster as camouflage for calculated murder. This is the story of how 43 people disappeared in plain sight during America's deadliest natural disaster, how they survived for weeks, not hours, how they died slowly while the world searched in all the wrong places, and how one man's greed turned a school bus into a tomb. The place that shouldn't have been built, St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana. August 2005. If you looked at a map, really looked at it with an engineer's eye or a geologist's understanding, you'd wonder why anyone ever built a city there. Sea-level marshland, sitting like a geographical afterthought on New Orleans' eastern flank, wedged between Lake Pontchartrain to the north and the Mississippi River Gulf outlet to the south. 67,000 people called it home. Most of them had been there for generations. Creole families whose ancestors arrived before Louisiana was American, Vietnamese fishing communities who'd rebuilt their lives after the fall of Saigon, working-class families in neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone else's business. The land was held back by levees and prayer. It flooded in moderate rain. In heavy storms, water turned streets into canals. Everyone who lived there knew the risk. But it was home. And home, dangerous or not, was worth staying for. 3 neighborhoods defined the parish. The lower 9th Ward sprawled across the northwestern section, a dense, historic, predominantly black community. Shotgun houses painted in colors that defied the gray poverty pressing in from all sides. Corner stores with hand-painted signs. Churches every 3rd block, each one a different denomination, each one packed on Sunday mornings. This was where jazz funerals still happened, where second lines danced through streets that flooded every summer, where poverty and pride coexisted in complicated, beautiful, heartbreaking harmony. Emily Chen lived here with her parents and grandmother in a house on Tupelo Street, 3 blocks from the Industrial Canal levee. She was 7 years old, obsessed with butterflies, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. Her bedroom window looked out over the street where she played double dutch with neighborhood kids. She'd just lost her first tooth. Her mother had saved it in a small ceramic box shaped like a butterfly. Chalmette occupied the central district, more suburban, more white, more working class. Oil refinery workers, dock laborers, casino employees, strip malls, chain restaurants, ranch houses with above-ground pools. The kind of place where everyone had a boat in the driveway and a generator in the garage because hurricanes were a fact of life, not a disaster. Marcus and Isaiah Washington lived here with their mother Charlene in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on Paris Road. Marcus was 11, serious beyond his years, protective of his younger brother in the way kids become when their father isn't around. Isaiah was 9, asthmatic, carrying an inhaler everywhere, wearing glasses held together with electrical tape because new ones cost money they didn't have. Their mother worked the night shift at Charity Hospital. The boys had learned to be self-sufficient early. The Vietnamese communities clustered along the eastern edge, fishing villages established after 1975, when refugees rebuilt everything they'd lost. Homes on stilts, Buddhist temples with incense smoke curling into humid air, gardens growing lemongrass and bitter melon. The smell of fish sauce and garlic drifted from kitchens. Shrimp boats lined the canals. These families had survived war and exodus. They'd survived hurricanes too. Lin Nguyen lived here with her parents, Tam and Hoa, who operated a shrimp boat. She was 5 years old, the smallest child in her kindergarten class, speaking English only in broken fragments but fluent in laughter. She brought her stuffed rabbit to school every day, a grey thing named Bun Bun that her grandmother had made before they left Vietnam. Her house sat on the eastern edge of the parish, closest to the surge zone, closest to where the ocean would try to reclaim the land, and cutting through all of it, the evacuation routes. Highway 39, Judge Perez Drive, St. Claude Avenue. Roads that would need to carry 67,000 people out before a hurricane arrived. Roads that, in August 2005, would fail. What nobody knew then, the Bayou Sauvage Wildlife Refuge, that vast maze of marshland and cypress swamps just north of the parish, held secrets beyond its alligators and waterways. Old access roads from oil exploration in the 1960s, most overgrown and forgotten. Abandoned hunting camps, some with underground storm cellars built during Cold War paranoia, when nuclear war seemed more likely than a Category 5 hurricane. Places where someone could disappear a 72-passenger school bus. Places where the storm surge would actually help hide evidence, not expose it. The last normal day, Sunday, August 28, 2005, Emily Chen, 6:30 a.m. Emily woke to arguing downstairs. Not her parents, they rarely fought. Her grandmother speaking rapid Cantonese on the phone, voice rising with each sentence. Emily spoke enough Cantonese to understand the important words. Storm. Dangerous. Leave now. She pulled her curtains back. Sunlight streamed through, beautiful and ordinary. But across the street, Mr. Johnson was boarding up his windows with plywood. 2 houses down, the Martins were loading their car, trunk already full. Dad tying suitcases to the roof with rope. It was Sunday morning. Nobody worked on Sunday. Nobody loaded cars on Sunday. Emily padded downstairs in her pajamas, purple with butterflies. Her mother was in the kitchen packing food into coolers with the kind of mechanical precision adults used when they were scared, but trying not to show it. "Morning, baby," Margaret said, voice too bright. "We're taking a little trip today. Maybe 2 or 3 days. Because of the storm. Because of the storm. Can I bring Mr. Whiskers?" Margaret looked at the stuffed cat worn nearly bald from years of love. Of course. What Margaret didn't say, she'd already packed the family photos, her grandmother's jewelry, their important documents. She'd withdrawn cash from the ATM the night before, $500, the maximum allowed. She'd filled both cars with gas. She didn't say that she'd looked at the weather forecast at 5 a.m. and seen something that made her stomach drop. A Category 5 hurricane, 175 NEPH winds, storm surge predicted at 20 to 30 feet. She didn't say that 3 blocks away, the industrial canal levee was only supposed to withstand 14 feet. She didn't say that if the math was right, water would reach their 2nd floor, maybe higher. She just said, "Pack a bag, sweetie, clothes for 3 days, and your toothbrush." Emily went upstairs to pack, humming. She chose her favorite shirts, her good shoes, the purple jacket Grandma had bought her for Christmas. She packed Mr. Whiskers carefully, making sure his head stuck out so he could see where they were going. She had no idea she'd never see this house again, that the industrial canal levee would fail at 8:10 a.m. the next morning, that water would hit their street at 20 miles per hour, 15 feet high, sweeping away houses like dollhouses, that her grandmother's body would be found 3 weeks later, still clutching the family photo albums she'd gone back inside to save. Emily just packed her bag, said goodbye to her room, and went downstairs for breakfast. Marcus and Isaiah Washington. 8 a.m. Charlene Washington hadn't come home. Marcus woke to his phone buzzing, a text from his mom. Working double shift. Hospital going into storm protocol, money on counter for food. Bus leaves 6:30 a.m. tomorrow from community center. I love you both. Be good for Mr. James. Marcus read it twice, then showed Isaiah. She's not coming home? Isaiah's voice cracked. He was 9, but sometimes he seemed younger, especially when his asthma flared up. She's at the hospital. They need her there. What if the storm? She'll be fine. The hospital's built for hurricanes, concrete and stuff, safer than here. Marcus didn't believe it, but he said it with enough confidence that Isaiah relaxed. That was Marcus's job, make his little brother feel safe even when he didn't feel safe himself. They ate cereal watching the Weather Channel, which had become the most terrifying programming on television. A meteorologist stood in front of a map showing Katrina's projected path, a red cone of uncertainty that included all of southern Louisiana. It's a Category 5 now, Isaiah said quietly. Mom says the bus leaves at 6:30. We'll be gone before it hits. Where's it going? Tulane University. They got a big shelter there, gym, cots, food, like camping but inside. Isaiah nodded, but his hands were shaking. Marcus could hear his breathing getting tight, the whistling sound that meant his asthma was acting up. Where's your inhaler? Bathroom. Marcus got it, made Isaiah take 2 puffs. The wheezing eased. They spent the afternoon packing. Marcus made a list, the way their mom would have. Clothes, 3 days each. Toothbrushes, soap, Isaiah's inhaler, most important, phone chargers, Game Boys, family photos. He found a photo of their dad in a drawer he'd left when Isaiah was 2, and they barely remembered him. But Marcus packed it anyway. Family was family even when they weren't there. At 6 p.m., Marcus made spaghetti. They ate in silence, watching the sky outside turn an apocalyptic shade of green. The air pressure was dropping so fast their ears popped. Wind rattled the windows. I'm scared, Isaiah admitted. Me too, Marcus said, because sometimes honesty was better than lies. But we're gonna be okay. We'll get on the bus, we'll go to the shelter, Mum will meet us when her shift ends. 3 days, maybe a week, then everything goes back to normal. He believed it when he said it. They both did. They went to bed early, setting 2 alarms for 5:30 a.m. They needed to be at the community center by 6:15 to board the bus. Isaiah fell asleep quickly, his breathing evening out. Marcus lay awake, listening to the wind pick up outside, watching shadows move across the ceiling. He'd seen hurricane coverage before, everyone in Louisiana had, but this one felt different. The meteorologists looked scared. The computer models showed the storm hitting them directly. The mandatory evacuation order meant the government thought people would die if they stayed. He pulled the covers up to his chin and prayed quietly, the way his grandmother had taught him. God, please keep us safe. Please keep Mum safe. Please make the storm not as bad as they say. God didn't answer. Or maybe he did, and the answer was no. Sarah Beaumont, 2 Malta p.m. Sarah spent Sunday afternoon on the phone, calling every family on the evacuation list. 37 children from her school district qualified for emergency transport. Families without cars, without means to evacuate on their own, most of them below the poverty line. Single mothers working double shifts. Elderly grandparents raising grandkids. Immigrant families still learning how the American disaster response system worked. Sarah taught 4th grade, but she knew many of these kids from around school. Emily Chen, who drew butterflies in the margins of every assignment. Marcus Washington, who turned in homework even when his little brother was sick and he'd been up all night. Lynn Nguyen, who barely spoke English but smiled constantly and tried so hard. She called each family personally, confirming they knew the pickup time, the location, what to bring. 6:30 a.m. St. Bernard Community Center, she repeated 37 times. Have your children there by 6:15. Bring a bag with 3 days of clothes, any medications, and a small comfort item. No large luggage. We have limited space. Some parents thanked her, some cried. One grandmother asked, "You promise my babies will be safe?" Sarah promised. How could she not promise? Her husband Rob was packing their own evacuation bag in the bedroom. They'd leave after the bus departed, drive north to his sister's place in Jackson, Mississippi. 200 miles, 3 hours in normal traffic. They'd be there by noon. "Sarah, we need to go now," Rob called from upstairs. "The weather people are saying this is the big one. Like Camille in 1969 big. Hurricane Camille had killed 259 people, wiped entire towns off the map. I need to make sure they all get on the bus," Sarah insisted. "I promised the principal. I promised the parents. The storm's supposed to make landfall at 8 a.m. We'll be gone by 7, I promise." She made dinner, red beans and rice, Rob's favorite, because she felt guilty about making him wait. They ate, watching CNN's endless storm coverage. Katrina was now 175 mph sustained winds, gusts to 215, the fifth strongest Atlantic hurricane on record. The computer models showed a direct hit on New Orleans with a storm surge that would overtop the levees. A FEMA official appeared on screen, face grim. "We're preparing for a catastrophic event. Mass casualties are expected. If you're in the evacuation zone and you haven't left yet, leave now. If you can't leave, get to the highest floor of the strongest building available. Write your name and social security number on your arm in permanent marker so we can identify your body." Rob turned off the TV. Sarah went to bed early but didn't sleep. She kept checking her phone, rereading the roster, making mental lists. 37 children, 6 adults, herself, Maria Santos, teacher's aide, James Thibodeau, driver, and 3 parent volunteers. 43 people she was responsible for getting to safety. She fell asleep sometime after midnight, dreaming of rising water, of children's voices calling her name, of a school bus sinking into dark water while she watched, unable to move, unable to help. It was a premonition. She just didn't know it yet. James Thibodeau, 4:00 p.m. The bus driver did what he always did before a major route. He checked every mechanical system on bus No. 47. He'd been driving school buses for 23 years. He knew this bus better than he knew his own truck. A 2003 Thomas built, 72 passenger capacity, painted school bus yellow with St. Bernard Parish School District in black letters, diesel engine, automatic transmission, reinforced frame for safety. He checked the brakes, pressure good, no leaks. He checked the lights, headlights, tail lights, brake lights, turn signals, hazards, all functional. He checked the emergency exits. Roof hatches opened smoothly, rear door functioned properly. He tested the two-way radio, clear signal to dispatch. Everything was perfect. His boss, the transportation director, stopped by the maintenance yard. "James, you sure you're good for tomorrow?" "Bus is solid. Route's been planned. I've driven evacuations before. This one's different. Category 5. They're saying..." "I know what they're saying. That's why we're getting these kids out early. 6:30 departure. We'll be at Tulane by 7:30. Plenty of time before the storm hits." The director nodded, but his face was tight with worry. "You get even a whiff of trouble, you call me. I don't care if it's 5 a.m. Roads flooded, take an alternate route. Something feels wrong, you turn around. These kids are the priority. Always are." James went home to his wife Denise, who helped him pack supplies for the trip. Water bottles, granola bars, first aid kit, blankets, flashlights, more than necessary for a 30-minute drive. But James had learned long ago that preparation saved lives. "You'll be back by Tuesday," Denise said, kissing his cheek. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet, but she'd been the steady center of his life for 32 years. "Wednesday at the latest. Storm will blow through, water will recede. We'll bring the kids back home." They had dinner, fried chicken, cornbread, green beans, and watched the weather coverage like everyone else in Louisiana. The storm was massive, filling the Gulf of Mexico, spinning with the kind of power that turned meteorologists' voices somber. James went to bed at 9 p.m., setting his alarm for 4:30 a.m. He needed to be at the depot by 5:30 to do final checks, then at the community center by 6:15 to begin boarding. He fell asleep easily. 23 years of driving had taught him to rest when he could. He had a job to do tomorrow, get 37 children to safety. He'd done it before during Hurricane Ivan, during Hurricane George. This would be no different, except it would be. So different that by this time next month his wife would be a widow, his name would be in news reports across the country, and 42 other families would be searching for answers that wouldn't come for 17 years. But on Sunday night, August 28, 2005, James Thibodeau slept peacefully, dreaming of nothing at all. The morning the world changed. Monday, August 29, 2005, 4 a.m. The warning. The National Weather Service issued its most dire warning in history. Not in the usual calm, professional language of government meteorology. In language that read like a eulogy. Devastating damage expected, Hurricane Katrina. A most powerful hurricane with unprecedented strength, rivaling the intensity of Hurricane Camille of 1969. Most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. At least one half of well-constructed homes will have roof and wall failure. All gabled roofs will fail. leaving those homes severely damaged or destroyed. The majority of industrial buildings will become non-functional, partial to complete wall and roof. Failure is expected. All wood-framed, low-rising apartment buildings will be destroyed. Concrete block, low-rise apartments will sustain major damage, including some wall and roof failure. High-rise office and apartment buildings will sway dangerously, a few to the point of total collapse. All windows will blow out. Airborne debris will be widespread and may include heavy items such as household appliances and even light vehicles. Sport utility. Vehicles and light trucks will be moved. The blown debris will create additional destruction. Persons, pets, and livestock exposed to the winds will face certain death if struck. Power outages will last for weeks, as most power poles will be down and transformers destroyed. Water shortages will make human suffering incredible by modern standards. Margaret Chen read it on her laptop at 4:15 a.m., coffee growing cold in her hand. She'd been awake since 3, unable to sleep, refreshing weather sites every few minutes. Certain death, incredible suffering. This wasn't weather forecasting. This was a death sentence. She woke David. "We need to leave now. Not after the bus. Now." 5:30 m. The Washingtons. Marcus's alarm went off in darkness. Outside their apartment window, the sky was the color of bruises, purple-black, lit occasionally by lightning that forked horizontally across the clouds. He shook Isaiah awake. "Time to go." They dressed quickly. Jeans, sneakers, t-shirts, jackets because the shelter might be cold. Marcus checked Isaiah's backpack 3 times. Inhaler, medications, clothes, Game Boy, family photos. "You ready?" Isaiah nodded, but his breathing was already tight. The barometric pressure dropping, the storm approaching. It always made his asthma worse. "2 puffs now before we go," Marcus said, handing him the inhaler. Isaiah took them, coughing slightly, then breathing easier. They walked to the community center, 12 blocks, normally a 15-minute walk. Today it took 30, fighting wind that pushed them sideways, rain that had started as a drizzle and was quickly becoming a deluge. The wind was already gusting to 40 mph. Palm trees bent horizontal. Street signs swayed. A trash can blew past them, tumbling end over end like a metal tumbleweed. Marcus held Isaiah's hand the entire way. His little brother's hand was small, sweaty, trembling. Marcus squeezed it. Almost there. 6 a.m. The community center. St. Bernard Community Center sat at the intersection of Paris Road and Judge Perez Drive, a squat brick building that served as a voting location, a basketball gym, and during storms, an evacuation staging area. By 6 a.m., families were arriving in darkness, car headlights cutting through rain that fell in sheets. Some had working cars, but not enough gas money to evacuate, so they sent their children to the shelter while they stayed behind to protect their homes. Some were elderly, unable to make the drive themselves. Some were simply scared and wanted their children as far from the storm as possible. Bus the 47 sat in the parking lot, diesel engine idling, headlights on, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the rain. James Thibodeau stood by the open door, checking names against his roster. Sarah Beaumont arrived at 6:10, soaked despite her raincoat. She carried a clipboard and a flashlight. The power had been flickering since 5:30. Maria Santos arrived moments later, along with the 3 parent volunteers. Robert Duchamp, a father of 2 who'd lived in the lower 9th his entire 53 years. Keisha Williams, a mother of 4, a church organist, a woman everyone in Chalmette knew and trusted. And Father Michael Dupree, last-minute addition, who'd shown up at 6 a.m. saying, "Children need prayer today more than they need another pair of hands, but I'll offer both." 6 adults, 37 children, 1 bus. 6:15, 6:45 a.m., boarding. The children arrived in clusters, hugging parents who fought back tears. Emily Chen's parents brought her at 6:20. Margaret knelt in the rain, holding her daughter's face in both hands. Emily's hair was already wet, plastered to her forehead. She looked so small, 7 years old, barely 40 pounds, gap-toothed and bright-eyed and trusting. "Be good for Mr. James and Ms. Sarah, okay?" "Okay, Mama. We'll see you in a few days. Tulane University has a big gym. They'll have cots and food and—" Margaret's voice broke. She pulled Emily into a hug that lasted too long, breathing in her daughter's shampoo smell. Strawberry. committing it to memory without knowing why. "I love you so much, baby. Love you too, Mama." Emily climbed the bus steps, clutching Mr. Whiskers, and found a seat halfway back. She pressed her face to the window, waving. Margaret waved back, smiling through tears. It was the last time they saw each other. Lynn Nguyen arrived with her mother Hoa at 6:25. Hoa didn't speak much English, but she spoke the universal language of maternal fear. She slipped a jade Buddhist prayer pendant around Lynn's neck, whispering in Vietnamese, "Phat Se Bao Vam." Buddha will protect you. Lynn, 5 years old and tiny even for her age, clutched her stuffed rabbit bun-bun and climbed aboard. She found a seat near the front, small legs dangling off the edge, not quite reaching the floor. Marcus and Isaiah Washington arrived at 6:35, soaked and shivering. No parent with them. Their mother was still trapped at Charity Hospital, the building in lockdown, all staff required to stay. Marcus found seats in the middle section near the emergency exit, because he'd learned from school drills that the middle of the bus was safest. He let Isaiah take the window seat. "You okay?" Isaiah nodded, but he was wheezing slightly. Marcus could hear it even over the wind and rain. "Inhaler." "I'm fine." "Inhaler." Isaiah took 2 puffs, his breathing easing. Marcus put the inhaler in his own pocket. Backup, in case Isaiah forgot. By 6:45, all 37 children were aboard, ages 5 to 12, a cross-section of St. Bernard Parish's most vulnerable. Some excited, treating it like a field trip, some scared, crying quietly, some stoic, old beyond their years, already learning that survival meant swallowing fear. Sarah Beaumont walked the aisle one last time, checking seatbelts, distributing snacks, offering reassurance. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. Tulane has a big shelter set up. Cots, bathrooms, food. Your families will meet you there, or they'll call once the storm passes. You're going to be safe." She believed it when she said it. James Thibodeau closed the door at 6:47 a.m. He radioed dispatch. "Bus 47 departing St. Bernard Community Center. 37 passengers, 6 adults. Heading to Tulane via St. Claude and I-10. ETA 7:25. Copy that, 47. Safe travels. Storm's making landfall at 8. You should beat it by a mile." "Roger. Out." James put the bus in gear and pulled out of the parking lot, windshield wipers on maximum speed, headlights barely cutting through the rain. Behind him, parents watched until the taillights disappeared into the grey morning. Several parents would later report feeling a strange dread as the bus pulled away. A premonition. A sense that something was wrong. But that's the thing about premonitions. You only recognize them after the fact. 6:52 a.m., the route. The plan was simple, tested, standard for hurricane evacuations. St. Claude Avenue northwest to Elysian Fields to I-10 west to Tulane University. Total distance, 11 miles. Estimated time, 35-40 minutes depending on traffic. The route would take them inland, away from the storm surge zone, toward one of the strongest buildings in New Orleans. The gymnasium at Tulane could hold 500 people, had backup generators, had been reinforced after Hurricane George in 1998. It should have been the safest place in the city. Bus number 47 headed northwest on St. Claude Avenue. Traffic was surprisingly light. Most people had evacuated Saturday or Sunday. The few remaining cars moved quickly, desperately, trying to beat the storm. At 7:05 a.m., they passed a police cruiser. The officer waved them on, giving a thumbs up. "Keep going. You're doing the right thing." At 7:10 a.m., they passed the last functioning traffic light before the power failed completely across the parish. At 7:12 a.m. and 33 seconds, they passed under a security camera at the intersection of Claiborne and St. Claude Avenue. The camera captured bus number 47 in perfect detail. Yellow, moving at approximately 35 millipas. Windshield wipers on high, heading northwest towards safety. It was the last confirmed sighting of the bus or any of its 43 occupants. 7:18 a.m., the deviation. What happened next remained a mystery for 17 years. Bus number 47 should have continued northwest on St. Claude, following the evacuation route. But somewhere between 7:12 and 7:20 a.m., the bus deviated. Instead of continuing toward I-10, it turned northeast onto Chef Mentor Highway, away from the shelter, toward the Bayou, into the most remote section of Orleans Parish. Why? James Thibodeau was a veteran driver who'd evacuated routes during Hurricane Yvonne George and 2 near misses before that. He knew the roads. He knew the plan. He wouldn't deviate without cause. Later investigation would reveal the answer, but in that moment the children on the bus noticed nothing wrong. They were kids. Most had never been to Tulane, had no sense of direction in the rain and darkness. All they knew was they were on a bus, heading somewhere safe, trusting the adults completely. Emily Chen looked out the rain-streaked window, watching palm trees bend in the wind. She hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. Marcus Washington held his brother's hand, feeling Isaiah's pulse racing against his palm. "Almost there," he whispered. Lin Nguyen clutched her jade pendant, whispering the prayers her mother had taught her, not understanding the words, but trusting their power. At 7:20 a.m., Tulane's emergency coordinator radioed St. Bernard dispatch. "We're not seeing any buses yet. What's the ETA on bus 47? Should be there by 7:30. Let me check." St. Bernard dispatch tried to raise bus 47 via two-way radio. No response. They tried again. Static. They assumed radio failure due to storm interference, a common problem during hurricanes. Nothing to worry about. The bus would arrive any minute. But at 7:25 a.m., bus number 47 still hadn't appeared at Tulane. At 7:30 a.m., the expected arrival time, the bus was nowhere to be found. At 7:35 a.m., something far worse began. 7:45 a.m., landfall. Hurricane Katrina made landfall at Buras, Louisiana, 60 miles southeast of New Orleans, at 7:45 a.m. as a Category 3 hurricane with sustained winds of 125 mph and gusts to 140. The wind hit first, not gradually increasing, but arriving like a physical force, a wall of air moving at speeds that made buildings shudder. Trees that had stood for a century snapped at their bases. Roofs lifted off houses like aluminum foil. Windows exploded inward, glass becoming projectiles. The rain came sideways, horizontal sheets that found every crack, every weakness, every opening. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. The world turned grey and chaotic, and then the water arrived. 8:10 a.m., the levees fail. The Industrial Canal levee failed at 8:10 a.m. Not a gradual weakening, not a slow overflow. It exploded. Water that had been building pressure against the levee wall found its weakness, punched through, and came roaring into the lower 9th Ward at 20 miles per hour, 15 feet high, a wall of brown water carrying cars, trees, pieces of houses, anything not bolted down. Margaret Chen's house on Tupelo Street was hit within 2 minutes. The front wall collapsed. Water filled the first floor in seconds. Emily's grandmother, who'd stayed behind to pack more photos, was swept from the kitchen into the dining room, slammed against a wall, pulled under. Her body wouldn't be found for 3 weeks. At 8:47 a.m., multiple levees failed simultaneously. The 17th Street Canal, the London Avenue Canal. Water poured into New Orleans from 3 directions, filling the bowl-shaped city like a bathtub with the drain closed. 80% of New Orleans began flooding. St. Bernard Parish was hit with a 20-foot storm surge from the Mississippi River Gulf outlet. Water rose to rooflines within minutes. The Chalmette refinery ruptured, spilling over 1 million gallons of oil into the floodwater, creating a toxic soup that burned exposed skin. People climbed into attics, then realized they'd trapped themselves. They used axes, hammers, fists to break through roofs. Some made it, some didn't. Bodies floated in the streets for weeks afterward. It was the largest natural disaster in American history, the deadliest hurricane since 1928. Over 1,800 people died in Louisiana alone. And somewhere in that chaos, amid the screaming wind and rising water and complete collapse of civilization, 43 people on bus 47 simply disappeared. The Invisible Tomb. August 29, 2005, 7:35 a.m. Bayou Sauvage National Wildlife Refuge. At exactly the moment Hurricane Katrina was making landfall 60 miles away, bus number 47 rolled to a stop on Old Shell Beach Road, deep in the Bayou Sauvage Wildlife Refuge. The children felt the bus slow, then stop. Some looked up from their Game Boys and books. Others had been dozing, lulled by the engine's rumble. "Are we there?" Emily Chen asked Sarah Beaumont, who stood at the front of the bus holding a handrail for balance. "I'm not sure, sweetie. Let me check with Mr. James." Sarah made her way to the driver's seat, where James Thibodeau was staring at the GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. His face was confused, concerned. "James, this doesn't look right," he said quietly, voice tight. "The GPS said to turn here. But this isn't the route to Tulane. This is—" He stopped. Ahead, through rain so heavy it looked like fog, a vehicle sat sideways across the narrow access road. Not abandoned. Its hazard lights were flashing. A pickup truck, Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development logo on the door. A man stood beside the truck wearing a yellow reflective vest, waving both arms. James eased the bus forward slowly, stopping about 30 feet from the truck. He opened the driver's window a crack. The man approached, shouting over the wind. "Roads flooded ahead. I'm with DOTD. I'm coordinating evacuations. You need to detour." James hesitated. The man wore the right uniform, drove the right vehicle, but something felt wrong. They were miles off route. The GPS had led them here, but why would an evacuation route go through a wildlife refuge? "I'm headed to Tulane University," James called back. "Emergency shelter. I have 37 kids on board." "I know," the man shouted. "That's why I'm here. St. Claude is underwater already. You can't get through. I'll redirect you. Follow me." James looked at Sarah, who'd heard the exchange. Her face was uncertain. "The storm's not supposed to hit for another 15 minutes, she said quietly. "How is St. Claude already flooded?" James didn't answer. He radioed dispatch. "Bus 47 to base. We've encountered a DOTD coordinator who says St. Claude is flooded, requesting alternate route confirmation." Static. He tried again. Nothing. The storm was interfering with radio communication, or the tower itself was down. The man outside was still waving, shouting something James couldn't hear over the wind. What James Thibodeau couldn't know, the man standing outside was Marcus DeRoche, 42 years old. DOTD employee, part-time school bus mechanic, who'd maintained bus number 47 the previous week. DeRoche had tampered with the GPS unit during routine maintenance, programming a false route that would activate when the bus passed a specific waypoint. He'd known the evacuation schedule, known the route, known the exact timing. He'd spent 3 days preparing this location, a clearing in the cypress swamp, accessible only by a single overgrown road, invisible from air or water. He'd rented an excavator under a fake company name. He'd dug a pit, covered it with boards, disguised it with vegetation. He'd planned this perfectly. What DeRoche had also known, Hurricane Katrina would hit in minutes, and the storm surge would flood this access road, erasing his tracks, making it impossible for anyone to follow. But James Thibodeau didn't know any of this. He just knew something felt wrong. "Stay here," he told Sarah. "I'll talk to him, confirm his credentials." James opened the door and stepped out into wind that nearly knocked him sideways. Rain hit him like needles. He walked toward DeRoche, who'd moved closer to the bus. "Let me see your ID," James shouted over the wind. DeRoche reached into his vest pocket, but he didn't pull out identification. He pulled out a .38 caliber revolver and shot James Thibodeau through the chest at point-blank range. The gunshot was loud even over the storm. Inside the bus, the children screamed. James fell backwards, hitting the muddy ground, blood spreading across his uniform shirt. He tried to speak, tried to move, tried to understand what had just happened. He died within 30 seconds, drowning in his own blood while rain washed it into the Bayou mud. DeRoche moved quickly. He climbed into the bus, gun raised, face obscured by the rain and the angle. Sarah Beaumont stood frozen in the aisle, unable to process what she'd just witnessed. Around her, 37 children were screaming, crying, trying to understand why their driver was lying motionless in the rain, why a stranger with a gun was boarding their bus. "Sit down," DeRoche shouted. "Everyone sit down and shut up." Father Michael Dupree, sitting in the first row, stood up. "What are you—" DeRoche pointed the gun at him. "I said sit." Michael sat. "Here's what's going to happen," DeRoche said, voice steady despite the chaos. "Hurricane's coming. You do exactly what I say, you'll be fine. You cause problems, people die, understand?" No one answered. Some children were still crying. Marcus Washington in the middle section pulled Isaiah close, covering his brother's eyes. "I said, do you understand?" "Yes," Sarah managed to say, voice shaking. "Good. Now everyone stay in your seats. Don't move. Don't make noise. This'll all be over soon." It was a lie. But everyone on that bus, 6 adults, 37 children, wanted desperately to believe it. DeRoche backed down the bus steps, keeping the gun visible. He walked to his pickup truck, retrieved a heavy-duty tow cable, and attached it to the bus's front axle. Then he climbed into his truck and began towing bus number 47 deeper into the bayou. 8:15, 9 a.m., the trap. The bus moved slowly, towed through mud and rain, deeper into the refuge. The children could feel the movement, the strange pulling sensation, the turns that made no sense. "Where are we going?" Emily Chen whispered to the girl next to her. "I don't know." In the front, Sarah Beaumont was thinking frantically. The man had a gun. James was dead. She'd seen him fall, seen the blood. They were being taken somewhere remote, somewhere no one would find them. She needed to stay calm, keep the children calm, wait for an opportunity. Maria Santos, sitting across the aisle, caught Sarah's eye. Maria was older, 53, had raised 4 kids of her own. Her face was pale but determined. "What do we do?" Maria mouthed silently. Sarah shook her head slightly. "Wait." Father Michael was praying quietly, rosary beads moving through his fingers. Some of the children near him joined in, not understanding the Latin but finding comfort in the familiar rhythm. After 15 minutes, the bus stopped. The towing ceased. They'd reached wherever they were going. Desroches got out of his truck and walked to the bus door. He opened it, gun still visible. "End of the line," he said. "You're going to wait here while the storm passes. Safest place you could be. Trust me." "Let us out," Sarah said, trying to sound authoritative despite her fear. "These are children. They need to sit still and be quiet. Food and water's in the storage compartment under the bus. You'll be fine for a day or 2. Storm will pass, I'll come back, get you to a real shelter." Another lie, but Sarah couldn't call him on it. Not with a gun pointed at children. Desroches backed away, closing the bus door. But instead of getting back in his truck, he walked to the exterior control panel, where the door mechanism was housed. He opened it and, using a wrench from his truck, disconnected the pneumatic pump that controlled the door. The door could no longer be opened from inside. Then he climbed onto the bus's roof. The children heard his footsteps above them, heard the sound of metal scraping metal. He was sealing the emergency roof hatches. Using industrial adhesive, waterproof and fast setting, he glued each hatch shut, the kind of adhesive used to seal boats, strong enough to withstand storm conditions, strong enough to trap 42 people inside a metal box. Sarah realized what he was doing. "No, don't. We need those for emergencies." Desroches ignored her. He finished sealing the last hatch, climbed down and walked back to his truck without another word. The engine started. The taillights disappeared into the rain, and 42 people were left alone in a sealed bus in the middle of a bayou as Hurricane Katrina arrived with full force. 9:30 a.m., the storm surge. At 9:01 a.m., the storm surge hit the Bayou Sauvage Wildlife Refuge, not a gradual rise. A wall of water, pushed by 125 mph winds, channeled through the bayou channels and canals. It arrived like a tsunami, 8 feet high, moving at 15 miles per hour, carrying debris, trees, alligators, anything in its path. The water reached the bus within minutes. It came up the access road Desroches had used, erasing his tire tracks, filling the clearing, rising up the bus's wheels, then the doors, then the windows. Inside, the children screamed as water began seeping through the door seals, cold, muddy, reeking of oil and rot. "Everyone move to the back," Sarah shouted over the chaos. "Higher up, away from the doors." They scrambled toward the rear of the bus, 37 children and 6 adults, piling into the back rows as water pooled at the front. Father Michael lifted the smallest children onto the top of the seats, keeping them out of the water. Marcus Washington carried Lynn Nguyen, who was too small to climb herself, and placed her on the seat back. "Hold on," he told her. "Hold on tight." The bus shifted, tilted slightly as the ground beneath it softened. Water continued rising. 6 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches at the front of the bus, and then, as suddenly as it had risen, the water stabilized. The storm surge had reached its peak, 8 feet in the low-lying areas, less in the slightly elevated clearing where Desroches had left the bus. The water level inside stabilized at about 2 feet at the front, 6 inches at the back. Not enough to drown them, not immediately, but enough to create a new problem: humidity. The interior temperature was already over 90 degrees. With water on the floor and no ventilation, the humidity quickly climbed to 100%. Breathing became difficult. The air felt thick, soupy, oppressive. "Why did he leave us here?" one child sobbed. "Why won't he let us out?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't answer, because she was beginning to understand that this wasn't a temporary measure, this wasn't shelter during the storm, this was a trap, and they were going to die here. Survival and slow death. August 29th, September 18th, 2005, Day 1. August 29th, afternoon. By noon, the storm's full fury had arrived. Wind shrieked through the bayou, bending cypress trees horizontal, ripping Spanish moss from branches in grey sheets. Rain hammered the bus's roof like bullets. Water on the floor sloshed with each wind gust that rocked the bus. The children had stopped screaming. Now they just cried quietly, or sat in shocked silence, or slept in exhaustion. Sarah Beaumont forced herself to think systematically. She was the senior teacher. These children were her responsibility. She needed to keep them alive until rescue came. Because rescue would come, it had to. "Okay," she said, voice loud enough to carry over the storm. "Everyone listen. We're going to be okay. This bus is solid. It's been through storms before. Once the hurricane passes, help will come. Our families know where we were going. They'll find us." She didn't believe it. But hope was a currency, and she needed these children to have it. "Right now, we need to stay calm and take care of each other. Maria, can you check the storage compartment under the seats?" Maria Santos found what James Thibodeau had packed: 6 water bottles, a case of granola bars, a first aid kit, 3 flashlights, 2 blankets. Sarah did the math immediately. 6 water bottles for 42 people. Maybe 16 ounces each. That was less than 3 ounces per person. For how long? She didn't share that math with the children. "We'll ration everything carefully," she said instead. "Everyone gets a little water now, a little food. Then we'll save the rest for later." They distributed tiny sips of water, 3 swallows each. 1 granola bar split 4 ways among the youngest children. It wasn't enough. Not even close. By 3 p.m., the wind had weakened slightly. The water inside the bus had drained somewhat through gaps in the floor panels, down to about 6 inches at the front, completely dry at the back. But the humidity remained unbearable. Children were soaked with sweat. The heat was oppressive, made worse by 42 bodies in a closed space. "Can we open a window?" Marcus Washington asked. Robert Duchamp, one of the parent volunteers, tried. The windows were the kind that slid horizontally. Emergency exits required them to be operable. He pushed hard. The window moved an inch, then stuck. Something on the outside was blocking it. He pushed harder. It wouldn't budge more than an inch. He tried another window. Same result. Every window was blocked. Deliberately. DeRoche had thought of everything. "What about the emergency door?" Keisha Williams suggested. They tried the rear emergency door. It had a handle that should activate when pulled down. Robert pulled it. Nothing. The door didn't move. He pulled harder. Still nothing. The mechanism had been disabled. "The roof hatches," Father Michael said. "School buses have roof hatches." Sarah climbed onto the seats and pushed on the nearest hatch. It didn't move. She pushed harder, using her full strength. Nothing. She tried the other hatches, all sealed. She could feel the industrial adhesive around the edges, still sticky, impossible to break without tools. They were sealed in. Completely. Day 1, August 29th. Evening. By 6 p.m., the storm had passed. The wind died to a steady breeze. The rain stopped. Outside, through the barely opened windows, they could hear the bayou settling, water dripping, trees creaking, the distant sound of birds returning. But no voices, no helicopters, no rescue. Sarah tried to stay optimistic. They're probably still dealing with the worst hit areas, New Orleans proper, the coastal towns. Once they secure those areas, they'll expand the search. We just need to wait. The children were hungry. The granola bars were gone. There was no dinner, just empty stomachs and the growing realization that this was real. Isaiah Washington's asthma was getting worse. The humidity, the stress, the confined space. It was a perfect storm for an attack. Marcus gave him the inhaler every few hours, but each time it seemed less effective. "I can't breathe right," Isaiah whispered. "I know. Just stay calm. Breathe slow. In through your nose, out through your mouth." By nightfall, the temperature inside the bus had dropped to a more bearable 85 degrees, but the humidity remained stifling. They had 2 blankets for 42 people. The youngest children got them. Emily Chen curled up in her seat, hugging Mr. Whiskers, trying not to cry. She wanted her mom. She wanted her bed. She wanted to understand why the man with the gun had left them here. "Ms. Sarah," she called out in the darkness. Yes? Emily? Are we going to die? Sarah's heart broke. No, sweetie, we're not going to die. Help is coming, I promise. But in the darkness, she wondered if that promise was a lie. Days 2 to 3, August 30 to 31. By the morning of day 2, the situation had become critical. They'd distributed the last of the water the previous evening, 6 bottles split among 42 people, carefully rationed, gone within 24 hours. Now they had nothing. The heat returned with sunrise. By 9 a.m. the temperature inside the bus reached 95 degrees. By noon, 105. The metal roof absorbed sunlight, turning the bus into an oven. Children were crying from thirst. Their lips cracked. Their urine turned dark yellow, then stopped altogether. Dehydration was setting in fast. Sarah scratched a message into the seat in front of her with a key from her pocket. Help us, August 31st, Sarah B. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but leaving evidence felt important. Proof they'd existed, fought, tried to survive. Robert Duchamp tried to break a window using his shoe. He hammered at the glass until his hands bled. The safety glass cracked, but wouldn't break through. The windows were designed to withstand exactly this kind of impact. By the afternoon of day 2, the first child died. Jasmine Porter, age 6, from Chalmette. She'd been diabetic. Her mother had packed insulin in her bag, but with no refrigeration, it had spoiled within hours in the heat. Her blood sugar spiked, then crashed. She went into diabetic ketoacidosis, confusion, rapid breathing, then unconsciousness. Sarah held her, tried to comfort her, felt her small body go still. No, Sarah whispered. No, 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 baby, wake up. Please wake up. But Jasmine didn't wake up. Father Michael performed last rites. The children who were Catholic crossed themselves, the others just cried. They moved Jasmine's body to the front of the bus, where the water had been, covered her with one of the blankets. The psychological impact was devastating. If Jasmine could die, any of them could die. Hope, that fragile currency, plummeted. Days 4 to 7, September 4th. By day 4, 3 more children had died. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, pre-existing conditions exacerbated by stress. Isaiah Washington died on day 5. His asthma, untreated, worsened until his airways closed completely. He suffocated slowly, desperately, while Marcus held him and begged him to breathe. Come on, little brother, come on. Stay with me. But Isaiah couldn't stay. His lips turned blue. His eyes rolled back. His chest stopped moving. Marcus screamed, a sound so primal, so broken, that it silenced everyone else on the bus. He sat holding Isaiah's body for 6 hours before Father Michael gently pried him away. He's with God now, Michael said. Fuck God, Marcus spat. God left us here. God watched us die. There is no God. Michael didn't argue. He just held the boy while he sobbed. The adults were faring only slightly better than the children. Dehydration affects adults more slowly, but the outcome is the same. Keisha Williams, the parent volunteer, died on day 6. Multiple organ failure brought on by dehydration and heat. She'd been giving her rations of water to the youngest children, sacrificing herself without telling anyone. Robert Duchamp tried one last desperate measure. He urinated into an empty granola bar wrapper and tried to drink it. Urine, while disgusting, can provide temporary hydration in survival situations. It made him violently ill. He vomited for an hour, losing more fluid than he'd gained. Maria Santos began hallucinating on day 7. She saw her children, grown adults who lived in Texas, standing in the aisle calling her name. "Mama, come home," they said. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't leave these babies." Sarah was deteriorating too. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin had taken on a grayish tinge. Her thoughts were becoming foggy, slow, confused. But she kept the children organized, kept them singing songs, reciting prayers, telling stories, anything to distract from the thirst, the hunger, the heat, the smell of death. By day 7, 14 bodies lay at the front of the bus. Days 8 to 14, September 5th, 11. The second week was slower, more agonizing. The initial panic had faded into resigned despair. People stopped trying to escape. They just waited to die. Emily Chen died on day 10. She'd been so small, so young, with so little body mass to sustain her. She simply ran out of strength. Her last words, whispered to Sarah, "Tell Mama I love her. Tell her I was brave." "You were so brave," Sarah said, crying. "So brave." Lin Nguyen died the same day, clutching her stuffed rabbit and her jade pendant, whispering Vietnamese prayers she'd learned from her mother. Marcus Washington died on day 12. After losing his brother, he'd stopped eating the meager food they found, dead insects once, which made several people violently ill. He just sat holding Isaiah's Game Boy, staring at nothing. He died quietly, slumping sideways, his hand still gripping the device. Days 15 to 21, September 12th, 18. By day 15, only 7 people remained alive. Sarah Beaumont, Maria Santos, Father Michael Dupree, Robert Duchamp, and 3 children, all older, all tougher, all clinging to life through sheer willpower. They'd stopped talking days ago. Conversation required energy they didn't have. They just sat in the back of the bus, surrounded by bodies covered with the remaining clothes, trying not to think about the smell, the heat, the hopelessness. Father Michael died on day 17. Heart attack, brought on by dehydration and stress. He was 68 years old, had survived poverty, war, loss, but he couldn't survive this. His last act was blessing the children's bodies one final time. Robert Duchamp died on day 18. Organ failure. He simply shut down, systems failing one by one. Maria Santos died on day 19th. She spent her final hours talking to her hallucinated children, smiling, saying goodbye. By day 20, only Keisha Williams remained alive, besides Sarah. The 3 older children had died the previous day. Keisha scratched her name into the seat. Keisha Williams, Sept 17. Please tell my children I love them. She died on day 21, and then Sarah Beaumont was alone. The last day, September 18, 2005, Sarah sat in the back of the bus, surrounded by 37 children and 5 adults, all dead, all covered as best she could manage. She should have been dead too. She didn't understand why she'd lasted longer. Perhaps better baseline health, perhaps sheer stubbornness, perhaps God's cruelty. She used her last strength to scratch one final message. God, forgive him. We tried. We held the children. We were not alone. Tell them we sang. Tell them we prayed. Tell them we forgave. Sarah Beaumont, Sept 18, 2005. Her hand shook so badly the letters were barely legible. She thought about her husband, Rob, about the life they'd planned. Children someday, a house with a garden, growing old together. None of that would happen now. She thought about the children, how they'd trusted her, how she'd promised them safety, how she'd failed them. I'm sorry, she whispered to their bodies. I'm so sorry. She closed her eyes. The heat was unbearable, but she was too weak to care. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breathing became shallow. And on the afternoon of September 18th, 2005, 20 days after Hurricane Katrina made landfall, Sarah Beaumont died. The last sound she heard was wind through the cypress trees, and in that wind, if you believed in such things, the laughter of children playing. The 17-year silence. Bus Thumri 47 sat undisturbed in Bayou Sauvage Wildlife Refuge for 17 years. Marcus DeRoche returned 2 days after Sarah died. He used the excavator he'd rented, covered the bus with 8 feet of earth, planted fast-growing vegetation, and left it to the bayou. Nature did the rest. Cypress roots grew through the metal, sediment accumulated, wildlife returned. Within a year you couldn't tell anything was buried there. DeRoche lived a normal life. He married, worked construction jobs, paid his taxes. The stolen money, $470,000 from fraud, paid off his mortgage, funded retirement accounts, bought a nice truck. He thought about them sometimes. 43 people, mostly children. He'd hear them in nightmares, crying, begging, asking why. But nightmares fade. Guilt, he learned, could be managed. You simply didn't think about it too much. For 17 years it worked, until a construction crew drove a piling into soft ground and hit something metal, until Agent Dana Reeves identified bus No. 47, until forensic anthropologists excavated 43 bodies and reconstructed exactly how they died, until DNA matched every victim, until phone records, GPS data, rental agreements, and financial records pointed directly at Marcus DeRoche. The revelation, August 17, 2022. Agent Reeves arrested DeRoche at his home in Slidell at 6:47 a.m., exactly the same time bus number 47 had departed 17 years earlier. He didn't resist, didn't run, Just sat at his kitchen table drinking coffee, waiting for handcuffs. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said. The interrogation lasted 12 hours. Desroches confessed to everything. "I just needed their documents," he said, voice flat. "Personal information, insurance numbers. The hurricane created chaos. No one was tracking anything. I could file FEMA claims, open credit cards, steal benefits. Easy money. So you killed 43 people for money?" "I didn't mean to kill anyone. The plan was to take the documents and let them go. But when I shot the driver, they all saw me. I couldn't let them identify me. I panicked. You sealed them in a bus and left them to die. I thought they'd die quick. Heat stroke, maybe a few hours. I didn't know." He trailed off. "I went back after 10 days. I could hear them. Still alive. Still crying. But I couldn't open it. What would I even say? What would I even do? You could have called for help. And spend my life in prison. They were already dying. I'd already committed. I just let nature take its course. Agent Reeves wanted to hit him. Instead, she just stared. Do you have any remorse?" "Every day," Desroches said. "Every single day for 17 years I've seen their faces, especially the kids. But what could I do? Confessing wouldn't bring them back. It would just ruin my life, too." "Your life," Reeves repeated. "You're worried about your life. I'm a monster. I know that. But I'm a monster who got away with it for 17 years. That should count for something." "It doesn't." Desroches was charged with 43 counts of first-degree murder, 37 counts of kidnapping of a minor, and multiple counts of fraud and obstruction of justice. Louisiana is a death penalty state. The prosecution sought execution. But on December 15, 2022, 3 days before trial, Desroches was found hanging in his cell. He'd torn his bedsheet into strips, fashioned a noose and hanged himself from the sink. He left a note, one sentence. "I'm sorry. It won't bring them back. But I'm sorry." The aftermath. The family's Margaret Chen attended every day of the investigation. She watched as her daughter's body was removed from bus number 47. She identified Emily through dental records and a small scar on her right knee from falling off her bike. They held the funeral on September 24, 2022. Emily was cremated. Her ashes were scattered in a butterfly garden built at the new St. Bernard Parish Elementary School. Margaret testified before Congress about disaster preparedness. She became an advocate for Emily's Law, federal legislation requiring GPS tracking, biometric check-ins, and enhanced protocols for evacuations. "My daughter died because one evil man exploited a disaster," she said in her testimony. "But she also died because our systems failed. We can't bring back the children we lost. But we can save the children in the next disaster." Charlene Washington never recovered. She held a private funeral for Marcus and Isaiah, burying their remains in plots she'd purchased 17 years earlier. She died of cancer in 2024. Her younger son, born in 2007, 2 years after his brothers disappeared, said she spent every night of her life talking to their photos before bed. "Good night, Marcus. Good night, Isaiah. Mama loves you. Mama's sorry." Tam and Huan Nguyen returned to Vietnam for a Buddhist ceremony, then brought Lynn's ashes back to New Orleans. They opened a community center in the Vietnamese district, offering free childcare and after-school programs. Above the door, a plaque, "Lynn's Light, Protecting Children, Honoring Memory." The memorial, on August 29, 2025, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, a memorial was dedicated at Bayou Sauvage Wildlife Refuge. The design, a bronze sculpture of a school bus, half submerged in a reflecting pool. 43 bronze butterflies emerge from the windows, each engraved with a name. The inscription reads, "In memory of the 43 souls of bus number 47, who sought safety in a storm and found only darkness. May their light guide us to be better protectors of the innocent." Every August 29th at dawn, people gather, one representative for each victim, and release 43 live butterflies into the Bayou air. Margaret Chen is always there, holding Emily's photo, watching the butterflies rise into the morning light. The final truth. Hurricane Katrina killed 1,133 people. It was nature's fury, indifferent and unstoppable. But Marcus Desroches killed 43 people using the cover of that disaster to commit calculated murder for $470,000. The storm was powerful, but human greed proved more devastating than any hurricane. In the end, The victims of bus number 47 died as they lived, together. Sarah Beaumont teaching songs, Father Dupree leading prayers, Marcus Washington protecting his brother, adults sacrificing themselves for children. They died together, they were found together, and now they're remembered together. Sarah's final message, scratched into the seat, reads, "Tell them we forgave him, not for him, for ourselves. Tell them we sang. Tell them we prayed. Tell them we held the children. Tell them we were not alone." And that's what Margaret Chen tells people when they ask about her daughter. Emily didn't die alone in the dark. She died surrounded by people who loved her, who sang to her, who held her hand. She died brave. She died loved. And that, Margaret says, is something no hurricane, no monster, no evil can take away. If you found this story meaningful, please consider supporting legislation that protects children during disasters. Emily's law is pending in several states. Your voice matters. Remember their names, honor their memory, protect the next generation. They were 43 lights extinguished too soon. Let's make sure they weren't extinguished in vain.